Hello everybody and welcome to this amazing video of the Tyde Guide. Today's topic is protections and its diminishing returns. It's been a subject that I've talked about and included in previous guides, but I've just generally covered it and didn't dive too deep into the subject. Usually my advice has been one item of defense while playing in Joust. But there's been a few ways around this general rule that could definitely benefit your build. Just remember, these guides are all for Jousting to help you guys better counter build your opponent. Let's first take a look at protections in more depth. There are two types of damage in this game, magical and physical. Each god only deals one type of damage outside of items. Unlike other MOBAs, basic attacks are considered to deal damage of the type of the god's power. For example, Freya is a mage and is noted to deal magic damage, therefore all the damage she deals, including abilities and basic attacks, are magic. As Loki, he is noted as a physical god, meaning that his basic attacks and abilities all deal physical damage. This is important to remember since it drastically changes your build and style of play against specific gods. While playing in Joust, I've sometimes noticed that people don't necessarily catch on and sometimes have that MOBA feeling that basic attacks are physical and abilities can be magical. However, this is not the case. So to figure which god deals what type of damage is pretty simple. Guardians and mages are the only gods that deal magical damage. Assassins, hunters, and warriors deal physical. With that out of the way, you should be able to have no trouble identifying the type of defense as long as you know the type of god each god is. As a side note, it is important to know that all minions, towers, phoenixes, jungle camps, and titan deal physical damage. Therefore, the only way to reduce that incoming damage is with physical protections. Also, physical gods are capable of dealing magic damage through items such as Mystical Mail, Hide of the Nemean Lion, and Shield of the Underworld. That would be the only way that you would see a physical god deal magical damage. Now let's look at protections and what they actually do for you. Here's a list of various ranges of protections. The percentages next to them indicate how much damage you are reducing. Remember that you need to subtract the opponent's penetration stat from your protection stat before looking at the chart, so that you can better identify where your protections really are after pen. For example, if your opponent has an item that gives them a flat 10 penetration, then you will take 10 away from your total protections. Let's say you had 30. You would then look at the chart for 20 protections, and that's how much damage you are mitigating for that opponent. However, if they have a percentage-based pen, like Titan's Bane or Obsidian Shard, which give 33%, you would then take your protections, multiply it by the percentage, and then subtract that from your overall protections, and that's where your protections will be. Taking a closer look at the protections, you'll see that there are large jumps of damage reduction while you are below 100 protections. As we see our protections increase above 100, you can see that steady decline of damage reduction per point of protection. Going from 50 to 100 protections, we gain about 18% damage reduction. However, while increasing protections from 100 to 150, we only see half the increase. This is a diminishing return. As we purchase more protections, we are actually getting less of an effect per protection for our gold. Therefore, we want to get our protections to approximately 100 after our opponent's penetration is calculated. So let's make this simple. You can expect your opponent to have a Titan's Bane or Obsidian Shard or some sort of percentage penetration, which usually totals around 33%. This would mean that they reduce more protections the more you have, and you have to keep your protections as close to 100 as possible to get the most out of your protections. So in order to do this, the magic number you need to have yourself at is 150 protections. With a 33% pen, your opponent will reduce your protections from 150 to approximately 100, which is exactly what we're trying to achieve. Taking a look at our gods, each god has their own base stat of magical and physical protections, and upon leveling up you'll notice that these protections actually increase. At the start of the game, your physical protections will be at their lowest and your magical protections will be slightly higher, and as you level up, you'll gain physical protections at a faster rate than you would your magical protections. With this knowledge, we now know that physical damage reigns supreme early game, and this is why towers deal so much damage. You don't have the physical protections to reduce its high damage to you. Once you get to the end game, you typically end with 60 or more physical protections, allowing you to take that tower damage. This allows us also to build a single item of defense to get close to that 150 protections and end up with a balanced build as far as damage reduction is concerned. Continuing to purchase a second item of protections will not provide as large of a boost, but at times can be helpful depending on the passive, and we'll get to that later. However, looking at magical protections, we'll have to take a bit of a hit as far as how much protection we get. At most, base stats will give us about 48 protections on most gods, 30 for mages, and then each god has their own individual stats, so keep that in mind. One item of defense would typically place you at a near 100 protections, and then with a 33 penetration rate from your enemy, that drops you down to 67. To build a second defensive item isn't a half bad idea because that brings you closer to your 150 mark. However, this cuts into your power, so just make that kind of a part of your build that if you do go double defense for mage, you need to incorporate some other way of dealing high amounts of damage. One thing to keep in mind about all these protections is that they serve little use without maximum health. In kind of a high level play and how they calculate their formulas, they usually consider protections and maximum health as effective health when combining them. I really won't be going over them today, however, just keep that in mind that there is a formula for effective health, how many protections you should get, but I'm trying to simplify this for everybody. Rushing a Breastplate of Valor may provide a good amount of protections for the cooldown that I notice a lot of people do in 3v3 Joust, but without that maximum health to sustain the damage, you're not really much more of a tank than the rest of your team. Try to find the items with a high amount of health to help compensate for items with only protections. Looking at how I usually build Guan Yu, you'll see I take 2 items of protection instead of 1. I do this only because of the passes of each item and not the protections. First Mystical Mail provides me an aura of damage, along with health and protections. This aura of damage allows me to clear lane and focus all my abilities on my opponent. Also, early Mystical Mail allows me to dive tower with all my damage. Typically, you can jump at your opponent and chase them under tower. Even if you're not landing abilities on them, Mystical Mail will usually kill them early game. Then, bring Nemean Lion on board, and then you amplify the damage you're doing to your opponent. Though yes, again, the protections are pretty good because they are probably the highest in the game. It's not the protections, it's the reflection damage. Keep in mind, even though that you reflect 20% damage, that's not 20% unmitigated damage. A lot of people think that crits are the worst thing when it comes to Nemean Lion. The only item in the game that does non-mitigated damage is Shield of the Underworld. Hide of the Nemean Lion reflects mitigated damage. For example, if Apollo was hitting me for 100 unmitigated, but my armor mitigates at 50%, that drops his damage to 50. With that 50, then Hide of the Nemean Lion takes 20% of 50 and reflects it. Essentially, if the hunter has lifesteal, it counters the lifesteal, unless they get more lifesteal. But it just cuts back on the lifesteal, and that's what it's really good at doing. Now the same thing applies for magical opponents. Again, let's take Guan Yu as an example. I get Gaia Stone as a form of defense, but really for regeneration. As my character builds health, Gaia Stone is like a mini potion constantly healing me. Then when I get Ancile actually provides health per stack, so it allows me to regenerate more, have 2 items of defense, and Ancile does provide cooldowns and power. So now I've got health, I've got protections, and power. I've found a way to balance my build against mages. So all in all, it's just remember that your protections only do so much, and you need to accompany your protections with health. If you truly wish to be tanky, you need to make sure you gain things. If you're a guardian or mage, Ethereal Staff or Warlock Sash will give you 600. Those are the 2 healthiest items in the game. If you're a warrior, Midgardian, Mystical, and Frostbound Hammer provide the highest health you can probably get. I know there's a couple items I'm not mentioning here, but those are just a few hints for you to combine health with your protections. So next time you go into a joust, take these tips with you. As a warrior, you could probably use double protections in a way that is more offensive than defensive. However, as a hunter or assassin, you don't have the highest base damage skills in the game, so you should really only pick up 1 defensive item and focus primarily on your damage. With all this considered, please remember that buying additional protections isn't useless. You still get damage mitigation. If you feel someone's dealing too much damage, pick up more protections, but don't worry about getting too much. If you feel that no matter how much protection you get, one item is enough to take down a lot of damage incoming your way. Plus, there is a lot of penetration to be had in this game, so sometimes it's just better if you can kill your opponent before they can kill you. That's all the time I had tonight, boys and girls. If you found this video helpful, please share it with all of your Smite friends. And if you like this video, give me that like, comment, and subscribe. I could really use the support. These videos take a lot of time and effort to get done, as I put a little more effort into these than I do my other videos. These take a little bit of research, time to write the script, and all the fancy jazz. I want to do more, so please in the comments below, as you're leaving that nice little comment from before, let me know what you want to know. Let me see if I can research anything additional into a Tyde guide for you guys. I have a few topics at hand, but something else could be more important and I could get that out of the way. I have a lot of ideas for videos, but I just need the time to get them all done. I found the time to get this one out of the way, and you know I'll find time for the other ones. Thank you all for watching, and as always, good game!